Hello and thanks for joining us on Democratic License, the program where issues of democracy and governance take center stage. My name is Amechi Anafu. It's been 3 weeks since President Goodluck Jonathan opened the national conference with an inaugural address here at the National Judicial Institute in Abuja. And after the inaugural address by the president, it didn't take long before the fireworks started. Delegates have gotten down to business with the rules of procedure guiding the conference adopted in no distant time. And of course, it didn't come with without some controversies, as the issue of what percentage should constitute a decision of the conference proved very hard not to crack. At the end of the deadlock, of course, progress was made as 70% was adopted. Responses of each delegate to the president's speech is what is going on at the conference, at least for the past few days now, and it is expected that every delegate, each and every one of the delegates will have an opportunity to respond to the address, inaugural address of the president. And of course, after that, the conference is expected to break into committees where, of course, issues in different thematic areas will be handled. And of course, this Tuesday that is talking about today, the leadership of the conference have been making last-minute efforts to ensure that appropriate delegates are put into committees. They will be more relevant on talking about putting round pegs in round holes. So it's time to take stock of deliberations at the conference so far and to gauge it with expectations of Nigerians on the outcome of the conference. Before we meet our panelists, let's take this report telling us about the resolution of the deadlock among delegates on what I told you earlier, what constitutes the decision level at the conference. Let's take that report.
It was a case of no victor, no vanquish. The decision to adopt 70% majority as an alternative to consensus was reached after a series of consultations between 50 selected delegates and the principal officers of the conference.
In the case of failure to reach consensus, the matter shall be decided by majority vote of 70% of delegates present and voting.
That the 50 wise men with with our proactive chairman came up, and his team came up with the magic 70%. I think we should commend them. I think it was a good development.
This resolution, it's acceptable to everybody, most especially majority are in support of it, and I think it's good.
Intense debates over the voting pattern as captured in Order 6, Rule 4 of the National Conference Rules of Procedure had polarized delegates, leading to several adjournments that somehow threatened the life of the conference. With the matter now amicably resolved, the National Conference Monday adopted its rules of proceedings, paving the way for further deliberations on other contentious issues.
From what has happened now, at least it shows Nigerians that the people who are attending this conference are very matured and that they are going to look at the problems facing this country dispassionately. And that being the case, I am sure we're able to find solutions to most of our problems.
Also at Monday's plenary, delegates adopted the conference work plan after extensive deliberations, which gave room for some key amendments, especially as it relates to the composition and structure of committees.
Earlier, conference observed a minute's silence for one of its delegates, Haman Misau, who passed on last Friday after a brief illness at the National Hospital in Abuja.
Because sometimes we also do a disservice to the elder statesmen and women when at 80, at 75, at 70, they are also saddled with stressful responsibilities. It's probably also a way to begin to say that, okay, look at the younger generation of Nigerians should actually also begin to take their place.
Delegates have since commenced discussions on key aspects of President Jonathan's inaugural speech at the national conference.
And the responses of the delegates to the president's inaugural address will hopefully be concluded on Wednesday. And like I said earlier, paving the way for the conference to now break into committees. Like you heard in that report, it was disagreement initially over voting formula, but after disagreement came an agreement. And it is hoped that indeed the delegates will continue to maintaining the same line, agree on very controversial and knotty issues that will come up at that conference. And now let's meet our panelists, a three-member panel that will take a look at the national conference so far, and of course try to match it with the expectations of Nigerians. On my immediate left here is Ohimai Amaize. He is a convening volunteer of Rethink Nigeria. Welcome to the Democratic License.
Thank you very much.
Next to him is Madaki Ame. Madaki Ame is a politician and a policy analyst. Welcome also to the program.
Thank you.
And we also have Pascal Metu of also Rethink Nigeria. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Let's start with you, Ohimai. Of course, how do you evaluate the conference so far? After 3 weeks, has deliberations and activities at that conference met your expectations?
Well, I would like to say that I was slightly disappointed because of the time that was spent going back and forth on, for instance, the issue of what should constitute the decision of the conference on some of the key issues that are being discussed. But Nigerians are optimistic. I'm a Nigerian who is also optimistic that this conference is going to produce something that will help us chart a proper direction for our nation. So I'm optimistic that so far something good will come out of it, in spite of the little setbacks that they've had.
Madaki, so far so good for you also?
Yeah, well, I don't share that optimism to that extent because I've also seen a few other conferences that I've held in this country. I don't think that the conference that is holding right now is substantially different from the National Political Reforms Conference that we had under Obasanjo.
In 2005?
Yes, in 2005. And quite frankly, a lot of issues were discussed at that conference. A lot of resolutions were made, but none of them was implemented, to my knowledge. I remember clearly that, one of the decisions I was taking was about the percentage of derivation that should be paid to states that are oil producing. And, it was meant to increase this from 13%, which is being practiced right now, to, I think, 25% was what was agreed at the time. And up to now, nobody has said anything about it anymore, And I don't see this government as having the will to implement anything significant. So we end up discussing for the next 3 months, coming up with resolutions which will not be implemented because I don't see how they're going to implement it, and especially we're in an election year, there's so much election activity already going on. So we have a government that has a history of not even being able to take the most mundane decisions. So how are you going to expect them to come up with a resolution, resolutions of this conference, and then put a mechanism in place to implement it through the legislature that doesn't get anything done? So really I don't share that optimism. I think we're just going to spend 3 months of our time, debating only to debate again, at the end of it.
How will you link the fact that for now the outcome of the conference, what happens to it is not certain? How will it link it to your stance that indeed the outcome will not be implemented?
Because, you have to learn from history. If you haven't been able to implement even the most critical of decisions from past conferences, you must show us how this will be different. And I think that instead of dwelling on debating the president's speech, which I think is a waste of time, they've heard the speech, then everybody stands up and talks about what the president said. It's going to just a sheer waste of their time. You get the point? They should go to business and begin to map out a proper agenda. But I think instead of even wasting time debating the president's speech, I think they should be debating how will the outcome of this conference be implemented. I've not heard anybody say that. So they're just going to sit down and have a discussion, and then they don't care how what the outcome of the discussion will be. Really, I think because we are very short on implementation, high on talk in this country, what should be the focus right now should be what is going to be the outcome of, what's going to happen to the deliberations of this conference relative to what we have seen in the past. And when they crack that, thank God they've come up with the majority, with the percentage, the voting percentage, 70%, that's fine. At least that shows that you build consensus across board. But the more important topic for me is what happens to the outcome of this conference.
Okay, Pascal, what are your perspectives there?
Well, for me, this conference, I see it as a positive move by the government, because if you look at the way the delegates, the way they were constituted, you see that it is very different from what we've been seeing in the past. I am not much of an optimist, but I think I dwell more with the realist, So I think they've started well, though not perfect, but I mean they still have a long time to go. So some of those issues he raised, I believe that as time goes on, they will get to that, like how do they adopt the resolutions.
Of course, the federal government threw that responsibility back at them and said, decide and advise us on what we're going to do with that one. So it will definitely come up for discussions.
Exactly.
Okay, back to you, Ohi. How would you rate the quality of discussions so far, the input of the different delegates, going by what you have observed in their responses to the president's speech? Has it been statements and speeches that inspire confidence in Nigerians and in you in particular, that these are the so-called 492 wise men and women that will give us the wise counsel for the way out?
Thank you very much, Amechi. I would like to say that I've not been particularly impressed, especially from the youth representation in the conference. I'm a Nigerian youth, and I represent that demography of young people who are tired of the way things have been run in this country, who believe that young people are not being given a chance to air their views and to represent this huge demography of a lot of Nigerians in governance. I belong to an organization, for instance, called Rethink Nigeria. And one of the things we're advocating is the representation of young people in government to the tune of about 30%. Because nobody's really talking about the fact that this is one of the biggest demography. This is in fact the biggest demography of people in this country. And we are being constricted to the demographical minority in politics, in leadership, and in government.
That's the majority becoming the minority.
Yeah, the majority becoming the minority. And there are feeding issues of youth development. There is youth unemployment. How are we going to tackle those issues? These are critical issues that we need to talk about. And I haven't really been particularly impressed yet. I haven't seen any of the youth delegates who has really addressed these issues. There are a lot of critical issues. Nobody, for instance, is talking about why we have a Ministry of Youth Development.
Maybe it's not time yet, because like we spoke earlier, after the responses to the president's address, at the committee stage, where a lot of work will come, maybe that's where these youth representations are going to push the agenda of the youth.
Yeah, but beyond that, you have about 12 youth delegates in the conference, and so far only one of them, I think maybe Hassan Rilwan, has actually reached out to young people, to engage young people and say, what do you guys think we should advance at the conference? You don't wait till 1 month into the conference, 2 months into the conference before you start engaging, the constituency that you are asked to represent. So these are some of the concerns that I have.
But there's a window for youth that are not in the conference and whose opinion may not have been sought. The conference last week also decided to get memoranda from the public to guide them in their decision-making processes. It's a window for
memoranda from the public is good, but you would also agree with me that such positions would also be much more critically and best advanced
from within. Okay, let's come to Maraki again. Your evaluation of the quality of responses from the delegates.
Well, like I said before, I don't expect much from this conference. I'm not an optimist as far as the outcome of this conference is concerned. And I think, my pessimism flows also from the quality of the membership of the conference itself. Most of the people there are old people. There are only 18 young people in that conference, 18, from the last count. By the time you add up everything, the average age in that conference is about 76. if you add up all their ages and divide by
I'm hearing of another figure, 64.
No, okay, but I did my own. I don't know the exact ages of everybody, but if you do a mean, you know, most of the people there are over 70. You know, a lot of people there are over 70. And you see, I don't understand why you will gather old people in a place. I don't have anything against age. You get the point. But most of those people have also been in all the conferences that we have had in this country. So many of them are not interested in what's going on, and that's why most of them are sleeping, because they have heard it all. You know, you saw all the pictures that were going around about people really dozing deeply when they are supposed to be participating in the activities of the conference, because of the relative, you know, age, you know, natural effect of age and air conditioning and all that. You don't expect them to be agile and participate properly, you know, in those events. And again, also because the topics are boring. Many of them have heard it all. So when they are talking about, you know, fiscal federalism, you know, derivation, this and that, these people have heard of all of these discussions, you know, in many of the earlier conferences they have attended. So why will you bring such people and put them again? You know, they have absolutely no fresh ideas to contribute. So where do you expect the fresh ideas to come from when most of the people who are in this country are young people, like my friend has just said, and then you are not putting them in a place to discuss the future of the country? Well, how do you use old people who will not be part of that future?
Maybe those that pick the delegates may have been guided by this notion that if you're talking about nationhood, then you have to resort to statesmen, and statesmen are mostly elderly.
It's good to have a few of them advise, but quite frankly, if you are shaping a future for a country, most of the people who are shaping that future should be those who will be there when that future will be realized. You get the point? I don't know anybody who has lived for 140 years before. You get the point? So if most of the people there are 70 and they're not going to live double of their age, you know, by natural operation by operation of nature, then you are saying in effect, you know, that you are not being fair to this country. You are not asking people who have a stake in the future of this country to plan the future of the country. I would have thought that the maximum age there should be like 60. You get the point? So that if you are more than 60, apart from maybe the chairman and the other people who will direct the activities and all that, well, if you are more than 60, you shouldn't be there. You get the point? Or
you're not calling for a special consideration for older citizens?
Yes, it's good, but quite frankly, this country has been run by them all this while, you know, since independence. And if we are where we are now, we are still trying to fashion a future, then it means they are failed. That's the truth.
Okay, let's come to Pascal Metu. Don't you think that experience could be vital when you're talking about finding solutions to the myriads of problems facing Nigeria? Like he said, men that have seen these problems over and over again, and they're not better placed to, of course, offer the much needed solutions than young people who likely may have read one or two history books but lack the requisite experience.
Thank you, Amechi. Actually, I agree with you, you know, because experience is one thing you cannot buy in the market. You cannot get experience by taking 100 degrees or, you know, whatever, PhDs or whatever you like, you know, but there's a very critical issue which you know, my friends here, you know, have raised. You know, let me start with this word that you cannot future in a future you cannot picture. You know, you cannot be a part of a future you cannot picture.
Yeah.
So this becomes a very fundamental problem, because now we need to, the national conference, they need to be able to articulate, you know, solutions that will continue to solve problems in the next 50, 70 years ahead. You know, but now, you see, you know, we live in the internet age. Believe me, most of these old people who are up to 70, 60, 75, they cannot tweet. They cannot tweet and do many other things that we do these days. You know, and these are the people you are planning their future. You know, okay, let's go back to the history where we're coming from as a nation. Balewa's cabinet had people from 40 or below in his cabinet. That was Balewa's cabinet. General Yakubu Gowon at 32 was already a head of state. And he was saddled with one of the, you know, the most challenging periods in this country. Yeah. That was when he had this challenge to solve the problem. And he did what he did.
Maybe the situation of the period they have just cited as examples threw up these young people. Nigeria was just coming into independence, political independence, and they were not much educated people. The bulk of the educated people then were young people, and they were the only ones available to take over the leadership.
Yes,
but the question I make
right.
is,
But we still have
this
advanced
from where?
today, like in America, in the United States, you still see young people coming out, people in their 30s.
Young
in
people
UK,
around the world.
I mean, the foreign secretary of the United Kingdom, you know, and then President Obama, you know, when he became president, and what made? Those are the issues we have to, you know, start looking at. You know, at the moment we start looking at things this way, you see, we start making progress. Like my colleague said, you know, this is a demographic majority, and now you are reducing them to political minority. You know, they are not. I mean, they are not in any way allowed to make decisions or help to articulate solutions to the problems that they will be facing. You know, to their own future. They are not allowed to make such decisions. And then, if you go abroad, you see Nigerian youth. They are everywhere. They do very well in sciences, in art, in movies. I mean, they are trailblazers. But when it comes to Nigeria, you find out that we frustrated our youth in such a way that many of them also go abroad to bring us bad names. You know, now there has been this issue that Nigerian graduates are unemployable. Fine, good as true as that may be. I mean, who has that responsibility to thoroughly educate these youth, to prepare them for future leadership, and to bring them out so that they start, because leadership is about learning. Sometimes you have to learn, you know, and you expose them to learning, and they become better. And at some point, they start taking decisions, and as they start following up, you know, the global trends now, because that's what we need to do. And I think we must commend the president for you know bringing up this issue of national conference, which is good. But we will continue to say that we are not impressed by the youth representation that we have witnessed in the conference.
The youths are asking for special consideration in the national conference and again in governance, just as the women are struggling and agitating for affirmative action. 35% reserved for women in public offices and other elective positions. Let's take this break and, of course, see the reactions of some women delegates at the national conference. They are talking about what should constitute the agenda of women in the national conference, another vulnerable group that are looking for special consideration.
It's complementary to our men and not a competition. And you say 20% equity contribution. By the time we finish here, by the time they finish all the rules and the laws, I think the country will be able to give us a little bit more, because for now, women are to be seen and not heard. For now, women are to be seen and not heard. And the respect they're giving us at this summit, confab, I think is overwhelming.
We've achieved up to, in some states, the 35%, in some states 20%. But in the federal government, we've achieved great percentage. You can see it yourself. In the appointment of Mr. President, he gave 13 ministers and more than 5 special advisors and senior special assistants to women. But come to the elective position, we are still far behind. And so we've come to this conference to speak and demand for women participation in all aspects of life.
What we intend to push is to have a fair representation in all spheres of life, so that we are not left behind. It's just as the saying goes, when you put a woman in a position, you are putting almost 90% of the population in it. You are involving more than 90% of the Nigerian population.
The office of the First Lady. Here, let us not look at who is there presently. I was a permanent secretary to the Ministry of Women Affairs, and I know what the First Lady suffer. As the First Lady, the whole world, especially youth, children, women, even men, they come to you, they cry unto them for help, for assistance, emotional issues that won't give us sleepless night. In most cases, you just turn pamphlet, take care. You know, how? Then you should go back later and say, what do we do? I'm talking from experience. The office of the First Lady needs to be recognized.
To come and agitate for the generality of Nigerian women, to seek for a voice to be heard, of the entire over 60 million Nigerian women.
60 million? Well, the youth will also tell you, and they are claiming here that they are the majority. At least that is a fact, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa. The demography of the population of most African countries throws up the youth as majority. And one of the members of the panelists here is saying that there should be special consideration for youth, and he's talking about 30%. But Ohimai, what do you think should be the agenda, the 18 youths that are presently in the National Conference who are youths, or at least under the age of 35 as stipulated by the National Youth Policy? What should they push to advance and protect the interests of the youth in the National Conference?
Okay, thank you very much. I think even beyond the issue of youth inclusion in governance, there are quite a number of other issues like youth employment.